Okay, so today we're going to actually get started in R. So we're actually making our first steps towards beginning the R portion of the course. And we're going to be taking baby steps towards getting ready in R. Today is really all about just kind of introducing you broadly to how to interact with R Studio. We're really not going to be doing that much programming today. It's really about making sure that you have the chance, that you understand like the kind of big picture of how you interact with R Studio before we start to get into the nitty-gritty stuff of programming. So let's jump right in and get started. So hopefully everyone had the chance to try to install the R base package and R Studio on their computer. I think if you haven't done it already, I have instructions in these slides, which you guys all have access to, about exactly how to do it. The first thing you'll need to do is install the R base package. And then the next thing that you need to do after that is just to install R Studio. Just really quickly in the chat box, how many people were able to get R and R Studio successfully installed on their computer? Pretty straightforward, pretty easy peasy. I don't think it's very difficult to do. Some different, MATLAB, I think, is another thing that's really easy to install. Certain things can be a little bit more difficult, like C was a little bit difficult to get installed on different kinds of machines. If anyone had trouble getting R installed, just hang around after lecture today, and we can troubleshoot exactly how to do that during the question period for this lecture. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. Let's talk a little bit about interacting with R Studio. So when you first open R Studio, what you'll see is something that looks like this, where you've got different panels in your R space. The different panels do different things, and you should know what those are. So the console is the first thing to kind of orient yourself to. It's here in this bottom left corner. And the console is where, oops, I didn't mean to switch slides. I'm sorry. The console is where all of the action happens in R, okay? This is where you're going to give commands via code, and they're going to be run in real time. And those commands might be like functions, or you might establish variables that way. And data is going to be manipulated and changed and worked on in that console space, okay? The next thing that you have to kind of orient yourself to is this panel right here, which is where you store your scripts. So you can save lines of commands to run as scripts. So a lot of times what you'll do is you'll save a script here, and then you'll highlight portions of it, or you'll run the entire script, and it'll run in the console dialog down here. So that's something that I think is a little bit unique about R and R Studio, is that you really are kind of just running things from the scripts into the console dialog. Once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to understand. Another important thing to kind of keep yourself aware of is this thing called the environment, which is really just your variable space. This is where you can actually see all of your variables that have been stored by your program in your current workspace that you've established. And you can see important things like, how are these variables being manipulated? It's really helpful when you're trying to understand, and you'll be looking at variables in this space a lot as you try to understand what your different commands are doing. And then the last spot is this kind of like miscellaneous section, and it's going to have lots of different things. Some of it will be about like the file structure. So if you click on this panel, it'll show your working directory, or what directory on your hard drive you're currently in, and what the organization of files looks like there. You'll also have things for plots here. So if you generate a plot, you can save it to a file, but it will also, you could generate plots to appear here if you want to see what they look like. You'll also have different other things like what packages are currently engaged. Packages I'll talk about in a second. And also the most important thing that you probably want to know as a beginning programmer, this is where all the help functions are. So you can type in a specific command and try to see exactly how that command works. And when you look up some kind of function to get help, you can see a lot of different things like examples of how to use it and stuff like that. So that's your RStudio workspace. Remember that this is typically what's called an IDE or interactive development environment. And the reason why I had you install RStudio is because I think it's a much nicer interactive development environment than the R-based package provides. So you don't have to use RStudio to do R programming. In fact, some of you may have seen other people just do R programming straight into the base package. You can do it that way, but RStudio is really just such a nice add-on that I find myself using it all the time, and it doesn't really slow you down or anything. If anything, I think it just makes things easier for you to see and understand. So I like RStudio. There are strong opinions about this, but some people are really passionately against RStudio, but I don't really get it, to be honest. It's a great thing to have. Okay, this is just kind of what I was telling you earlier, so I don't think we really need to go over anything that's here. There are some keyboard shortcuts, and they're going to differ on Windows and Mac. And the weird thing about doing this course virtually online is that you're not going to be able to see what keys I'm pressing sometimes in the background to do different things. So some of these shortcuts are really like you can clear the console or you can run a current line. This is one that I'll probably use the most in this course, is just where I'll highlight a portion of the script and then I'll press Command Return on my computer just to run that line. You can do things like run the entire script with no echo, meaning that it won't show line by line what's happening in the console. You can run the entire source script with echo, which is, I think, the most common way that I've done it in the past. You can also, there's some shortcuts for commenting things. I don't know you necessarily need that, but sometimes it's helpful just to like highlight a large swath of code and comment it out. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my mouse today. Yeah, you can highlight a large swath of code and like comment it out in case you're trying to troubleshoot something. And another command that I end up using a lot is this auto indent command. You can highlight like a large portion of the text, and if you haven't formatted it pretty, you can just press Command I and it'll automatically format that. Remember that with programming, you really like things like indenting are important because they'll make things easier to understand. It won't matter so much as you begin this indenting lines because we're not going to be making things that are that complicated, but once you start making actual analysis programs, you'll want to get in the habit of doing that. Okay, and the last thing is that in R, instead of using equal signs to establish variables, you can do that, but they really encourage you to use these arrows to do it. And you can make the arrow by just typing like a left-facing arrow on your keyboard followed by a dash. I didn't actually know this before teaching this course. I guess you can actually just hit like Option dash on a Mac keyboard and it works. But okay, there's many other shortcuts. You can look them up as you need. I think I gave you the greatest hits of the shortcuts in that previous slide, so you don't need to look at this, but in case you were ever interested, I wanted to put up a full sort of linkage to where all the shortcuts that you can find are. Another thing that just is helpful to think about while we're orienting ourselves to RStudio, and if you're someone who's a programmer in another language, you probably know this is important already, but the idea of commenting. Comments are just a way of keeping notes for yourself in a code. And in R, what you do is you just use a hashtag symbol, and then you can type text after it. And that, what'll happen is that you will basically, the computer program is going to ignore the text after that. So you can leave little notes for yourself. And in RStudio, they'll show up in green when you do that. So commenting is really useful because sometimes you want to tell yourself what's going on. And you're going to see in a lot of the sample programs for this course, I've done a lot of commenting to try to remind you of what it is that we're doing. So if you come back to it later, you'll understand it. Okay. One thing that's important to understand about R programming as well is just the difference between variables, functions, and someone asked, are asterisks okay to use too? I'm not sure. I've never done that in R, so I would just stick with what we're doing here. But if it actually works, then it works. I just have never heard of that in R, but I also really, I think, yeah, I don't know if that actually works. I don't think it does. Okay. So variables, functions, and packages. Oops, gosh, I don't know what's going on with my mouse today. Okay, so variables are just a value, a letter, or a string that's stored by the computer program. It can also be an array of letters or strings. So variables, we're going to make a lot of variables to store data and do stuff like that. Whereas functions are going to be an operation that does something to a variable. So like we were already kind of playing with the idea of functions in Excel when we were like getting like an average. Similarly, the R base package is going to have a lot of things for this, like a mean or a sum. There will be functions for that. And then a package is really kind of like a library is, and a lot of other computer programming languages. It's really a compiled set of functions. And there are base functions that come with the R package. Okay, so there are functions that come with the R package that you can use. You can also make a compiled set of functions. Or download special packages or make your own package, I guess is what I was trying to say. I don't think making your own package is something that I'd start with. It's pretty advanced. So, but we will use packages in this course that don't come exactly from the R base package. For people who are familiar with R and maybe have a little experience up with it, what are packages that you guys may have heard of before in R? You can type them into the chat box. Someone had actually already mentioned one in a previous lecture. Yeah, tidyverse is a very common one. ggplot is one. dplayer is one as well. There's lots of them, and they're all meant to do different kinds of things. Like ggplot, for example, not surprising, is a package that's really specialized to make really pretty plots, even though R comes with its own ability to make it. We also, tidyverse has a lot of functions that are meant to like make things tidier and easier to organize. So that's about it as far as like interacting with the R base package or RStudio goes, and just some basics of R and thinking about it as a language. A lot of these things are common to other languages as well. Like most languages have variables and functions and some kind of repository of functions, whether they're called packages or libraries. A lot of other computer languages will allow you have interactive development environments that allow you to see the workspace, like MATLAB has that. A lot of them have consoles where you can run single lines. MATLAB has that, for example. And almost all computer programming languages use commenting and indentation to try to keep things clean and pretty to look at and allow you to do it. So R is not that unique from other computer programming languages. These are functionalities that you'll see in a lot of other languages. Are there any questions before I continue into the next part of the class, which is really about showing some demos from the getting started program that we made? Feel free to raise your hand if you have one, but it seems like everyone's like good to go at this point, and maybe everyone's. Kendra, do you have a question? Maybe you'll just ask. I think it's easier if you just ask on raise your hand. And
Yeah, I was just asking, do different packages ever have the same functions, or like how do you know what package you need, I guess?
yeah, that's a good question. Usually, if you try to use a function and you haven't actually like loaded up the package and installed it on your computer, R will let you know that that function doesn't exist. So that's one way to know. Another thing is that it is true that sometimes two packages can have the same functions. R will often try to warn you when that happens, but I'd say it's not very common. People who are making packages really do try to steer clear of other people's function names. Yes, Madeline.
Yes, I was wondering, like if say you want to run something through RStudio, do you have to have R open and running like at the same time in the background while you have RStudio open?
That's a really good question. And the answer is no. You can just open up RStudio. You don't need to run the R-base package in the background. It'll automatically do all of that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think at least that's how it works on Mac. I'm pretty sure it works the same way on PC. So if I'm doing anything throughout this course and it doesn't work on a PC, please let me know. It's hard to know what you don't see, and I'm just working on a Mac computer. So if you guys see something like that, you just let me know if there's some kind of big glaring problem, and I'll try to fix it. Some of it might be like you're using command enter, blah, blah. Don't tell me about shortcuts and things, but if it's a big problem, I do want to know about it. All right, are we ready to keep going? It seems like. All right, let's switch into the RStudio then at this point. Can everyone see RStudio on my screen right now? Okay, seems like the answer is yes. I learned from posting my last video that it is helpful if I use super big fonts here. So I really have zoomed in. It might look kind of goofy on Zoom, but it's meant so that everyone can see it. Is it pretty clear? Can everyone see the text, or should I zoom in a little bit more? I don't know. You tell me. Clear? Okay. I mean, we could go bigger if it's helpful, but I think this is probably good enough. Okay, so right now I've loaded up a program here, and here this is just the getting started program. And you can see here that I'm using hashtags to comment kinds of things, like I'm telling you what this is called, and I'm writing my name at the top of my program. I recommend that you do get in the habit of titling your programs, writing your name on your programs, and sometimes even writing a little description of what the program does. I haven't done that here, but it is a useful idea to do. I would also recommend, breaking your computer programs down into sections and using some kind of standardization to try to indicate like what those headers are and separate them from like comments that tell you other stuff. So I have done that here. I'm adopting my own style, but the beauty of programming is that you can make up whatever style you want. You just want to make sure it's clear and easy to read. Okay. So let's go through this program here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the console dialog here, which I can press, I think, Control L. All right, so I just press Control L to clear out the console dialog. I don't need to do that. You can see here I was kind of messing with stuff before class just to make sure different things worked. And you can see that I've got some variables stored in my environment. And these can be problematic if you're going to continually rerun code over and over again. They might not always be a problem, but they can be. So you always want to have this line at the top of your program. It should always be the first line of your program, should be this remove list. It's basically just ask what all of the variables are in the environment, and it clears them from the environment. So it's just like the clear all command if you're familiar with MATLAB. And I'll just forewarn you that on the online lecture, I did something like this where I used an arrow. So you will have to change this to an equal sign. I'll update these as we keep going through the course to make sure they're correct. So I might find little bugs here and there. This is an example of a bug that I found. So this is what you should use. So you can see here that we cleared this workspace over here and the environment is empty. So everything looks pretty empty at this point. So now let's try to run. And by the way that I ran this is I just highlighted it and then I pressed Command Enter on my Mac here. Okay, so let's make our first program, and typically the first program is that you'll make is often like the Hello World program where you just get the computer to type Hello World. So in this version of it, we could run it like such, where I just press Command Enter and I'm running the one line. And you can see that it's putting Hello World as a kind of variable here. So here the variable's name is T, and it's a string variable that says Hello World. In the command window, we could make this show up in different ways. Like I could go down here and type T, and I'm basically asking like, what is T? It says T is Hello World. I could also try to print the value of T to the dialog screen via the print function. You don't really need the print function in this type of language. The print function is more useful in a lot of other computer languages that don't work like this. So we've stored our first variable that we've ever done before, and we've just stored it here, and it's showing up in the environment. And you're seeing that's giving the name of the variable and what it is. We could really set this variable. We could make variables that do anything, and I'll show you a lot about these different variables in the next class and how to declare them. We could make it be like a number if we wanted to. Could make a variable. We could name our variables really anything we want. Like we could name them, I don't know, like nachos if we wanted to. We could say anything we want and then like make like a number and just have it store. You can really name them anything that you want. I'll kind of show you how we do this. In the next lecture, we'll talk all about different kinds of variables and how to store them. The main thing to know in this lecture is just that you'll have your variables stored over here and you can kind of see them. And you can make them show up in the dialog just by typing them like this over here. So if you're ever wondering like, what is happening to this variable? I can't tell. You can just type it and say like, tell me what this is. And it's giving me the value of that. Another thing that's important to know how to do in R is to set your working directory. Your working directory is where you live on your computer. And you can see right now, we're not in the right directory. right now we're in some directory that's very specific to my own computer. And you may see this happen in other sorts of things and programs that I've shared in this course. So the directory is really going to depend upon what your hard drive looks like. So one way that you can set the directory, and this is really useful trick, the function that you use to set a directory is just called set WD, so set working directory. And then you can just select a folder on your hard drive. So I'm working from a Mac and I want to get to the desktop, and the desktop is pretty close to the root of the hard drive on a Mac. So the way that I've done it here is like set desktop, and I'm using this specialized sort of function here, which is this tilde sign. The tilde sign bypasses this portion of your hard drive. So my hard drive would look like C:// and then you'd see like users on a Mac, and then it would have whatever my username is. This is something that was set up by the university, but it would look different if we ran the same thing on your computer. Well, you can get rid of that on a Mac by just typing a tilde sign, and it automatically assumes whatever user you're logged in as it'll use. So I would get used to using this and never type users ngf 96. Orienting around on a PC might be a little bit different. So I think you'll want to definitely look at the book and understand that. How many people are working on Mac computers in this class? That'd actually be something that's helpful for me to know about. Okay. How many people are working on PCs in this class? Okay. We have some PC users. It seems like most people are Mac users, and some of us are PC users. That's pretty typical for this kind of thing. The main thing that's going to be pretty different on a PC is just some of the navigating between directories. So you'll definitely want to look into that and just kind of check it out in the book. It probably is not going to matter for a lot of the programming that we do in this course, but as we're like opening up files and writing files to directories, you may have to kind of figure things out a little bit on your own. Okay, so you can see here I use this thing called setwd to move the working directory of where we're writing stuff from. Now the files here is not showing the working directory, it's just kind of showing where we started. It hasn't updated to where we're at the moment. I don't think it's going to necessarily show that. It just kind of opens up to where you opened up the program from, but we're actually in a directory right now. I've set the directory that we're working in the environment to be the desktop at this moment. If I wanted to know what working directory I'm in, I can actually just run this command called getwd. I could run it here. And it's telling me, okay, yeah, you're in, this is the directory that you're in right now. I just set it up here to store it as a variable. And so now it's stored what the current directory is as a variable named current directory. So you can set the working directory and you can get the working directory, and then you can save whatever the current working directory is as a variable. I could switch if I wanted to go to like my documents folder, I could do it. And how would I check to make sure that this has worked and I've actually switched to my documents folder? What command would I use? Anyone brave? Yeah, get WD in this case. So we just use get working directory. All right. If I wanted to change the working directory, what command would I use? Set WD. All right, so those are two functions, and these are functions that come with the R base package. So you can see here that we're just, hopefully you're getting a kind of idea, and I think definitely your homework after class, if you're not following along with me in class right now, is that you'll want to go through and you'll want to start practicing interacting with the environment. So like highlighting a command and then running it. And you could do that various ways, but the easiest way is to use some sort of keyboard shortcut and run it into the command window. So here I'm using Command Enter. Okay. You should get used to this idea of interacting with R there. You could select multiple lines to run, and I could just run, for example, this. I could run large portions of code, and you can see that it's working through very quickly when I do that, right? So it doesn't take it very long to run that code in the working directory. All right, so one thing that's going to be useful, and if you're following along with me at home, this is one of those things that you'll need to do for our future classes. The packages that we're going to use in this class are this, and I think you just need to open up R and you need to run these commands. I've already installed these packages on my computer, but it doesn't matter. You can just reinstall them again if you wanted. So I'm going to install the packages tidyverse, reshape2, and ggplot2. And the way that you do it is you just type install packages, and then you type the package's name, and it'll automatically grab that from the internet. So if I go ahead and run this line, it's going to start downloading it from the internet, and then it just installs it on my computer. It's already installed on my computer, so it's actually just said to me like it's already been done before, and I don't think it's actually like doing much in terms of installation here, but you can see that it is in your computer. It may take some time. I did see a little typo in the previous and what I posted online where I put install package, should be install packages. So if you have the time right now, I think it'd be a good idea for everyone to kind of open up RStudio and then type install packages and then run the install packages for each one of these packages. And I'll just kind of sit tight and hang out for like 5 minutes or so. And once you have it done, you can type done in the meeting chat. And if you run into problems, you just put something in the chat, and what we'll do is we can meet with you after class to make sure it gets done. See some people typing done. Maybe these are folks who did it last night already, or maybe it's just really fast to install for some of you. I bet it might take like a few minutes if it's your first time running it. This is me running it, but I've actually already installed these packages, so it doesn't actually have to go through the full installation process. Sometimes it'll run several lines, and when it's done, it'll tell you that it's done. Definitely do type done in the chat box so I know when it's done on your end. And once we get enough people. So installing packages, just to kind of talk while you guys are doing it, installing packages is really, really easy in R. You know, some programming languages, it can be a real bear to try to install different packages. But I'd say one of the easiest things about R is installing a package of functions is built in to it. You can just download it straight from the internet, and it does all the installation from you via an existing command that you can type in. It's not like that in every computer. Sometimes you have to drag and drop something into the correct folder on your hard drive or do different kinds of things. Pretty easy, pretty simple in R. All right. Seems like most folks are done. It seems like most people have run the code. Is there anyone out there? Well, if someone's out there and they're struggling at this point, we don't have much of the class left to go. So what I'll do is I'll just finish this portion of the lecture. And then if you're still having problems, you can just stick around. So the way to test that your packages have actually installed correctly is to now try to load the package. And the way that you do that is to use the function library. And then you just type the package name. What that does is it loads it up into R, so R knows that you're using it in this script. So usually library would be something that's at the top of your script, so you know what libraries you've loaded for that individual script. But here we just are going to test the packages after we've installed them. So you don't need to reinstall packages every time you run the script. You only need to do that once in your life. You need to load up the packages though every time you want to use them. Okay, so here I'm going to do it. You can see here for me, it just loaded up library reshape 2 and gave me no error messages or anything like that. Sometimes it'll tell you things about what it's got installed. Someone had asked earlier, was it you, Madeline, that asked about what happens when two things use the same function? Here it's giving you an idea of that. Sometimes it'll tell you ahead of time. All right, I've loaded up. So run these 3 and then maybe just type like success into the chat box after you run this test to make sure you can load up all of your packages accordingly. Perfect. I can actually simulate what would happen if we tried to load up a library that didn't install successfully. I'm just going to do it by making up a library that doesn't exist. What do we want to call our made up library? Maybe like Lady Gaga or something like that, I guess. Says basically like, this library doesn't exist. I don't know what you're trying to do here. You don't have this library installed on your computer, so you'd have to try to install it. There's no Lady Gaga library, by the way. I just typed in whatever random thing I didn't think would actually be installed on my computer. Would be cool though if there was one. Probably be a controversial library. All right. So it seems like everyone's all set. That's basically it for today. Today's a pretty short day. We're not actually doing a ton. It's Friday. I'm sure you guys want to get out into the world and hang out. Today is really just about like getting the R package installed. And I wanted to leave some extra time to meet with people and help them if they were having a hard time. So this is one of those things that can be tricky. But if anyone has any kind of questions before we go, then make sure they're like, yeah, Kendra.
So I had a program already pulled up in R and I just closed out of it to like download our new packages, but I still have my old packages like selected. Is that a problem?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I just wanted to check.
No, I don't think so. Is it Madeline or Madeline? I assume Madeline.
Oh, that's Madeline.
Madeline. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I had a similar thing with Kendra. I had another thing loaded in our studio, but I closed out of it and I reopened our studio. But when I tried to load some things, it said like the following object is masked from package
Yeah, okay,
tidy R. Like there's
okay, so let's do this just to make sure. If you have a general question that you think would be like
okay.
a useful question for the class, then let's handle those now. But if you're having a specific problem that you want to resolve, let's wait, because I just don't want everyone to have to hang around for each individual. So if you have a general issue, why don't we, or question, we can ask them. Yeah, Margaret.
I might have missed this at the beginning, but how do you rename I don't even know what it's called, the file, like you're getting started.r. How do you rename that?
Yeah, all you'd have to do is, can you see the file command here when I'm sharing my screen?
No, I think it's just the R window.
Okay. Well, what you would do is you would just go, you should have some kind of file thing. You can go file, you can go save as, and you should be able to like pick what you're going to save the file as. So here you could save it as like, I don't know, getting started in R2, and it's telling you where do you want to save it in your hard drive and that kind of stuff. So you'd use the same kinds of things to save, just like you would in like Microsoft Word or anything. You're just going to save the script and you just go to file. And here I just literally went to save as. Another way that you can do it is if you just want to save some sort of change that you've made, you can just press Command S and it's going to save the file. So you see how it's like red here, meaning you've made a change and it's not saved. I'm going to press Command S and it's going to change to black, meaning that it's been changed. I think you can also press Command Shift S and it, oh, no, no. Okay, no, that's different. It's going to just rerun the entire script. Okay. All right. Okay, so again, does that answer your question, just to be clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
I had one more question.
Okay.
So, does the color of the text like mean anything significant we should know about? Like how some things are blue and some are green and
Yeah. I mean, R is going to use that kind of stuff to denote different things. And generally, like green usually means some kind of comment or some kind of text string. Okay. So that's where the green is being used here. Blue shows up occasionally. Blue is a different kind of thing, but here it's showing up for libraries. I'd say the main thing to know is if you ever see red in your command window, usually they're using that to indicate some kind of important message that you want to know about. It might not be an error, but it's something that you should look at to make sure that something worked the way you did. Sometimes it will be an error. Sometimes it'll be just something like this. I'll be like, hey, I'm installing this package on your hard drive right now. So red is a good thing to look out for, specifically in the console dialog. Those are two good questions. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, if you're having any, again, make sure that you work through this if you hadn't had the chance to already. You want to kind of get comfortable playing around, start to try to use keyboard shortcuts. You might even print them off, the ones that I had before, so you have them right next to your computer so you could see the types of things that I'm doing. It's really good to get familiar with those keyboard shortcuts, and practice will make perfect. You know, might take you some time to do it, but you want to get that muscle memory built up in your hands so you can interact very quickly without having to point and click around the whole time in our studio. And make sure you practice interacting a little bit before the next lecture, and don't do it right before you show up at the next lecture. Maybe take an hour this weekend just to kind of like spend some time pointing and clicking around and running little commands and things like that. And next lecture, we're going to start to talk about actual variables and different things like that related to it. So if you have us, so have a good weekend to everyone who's all set. If you are having a specific problem that you want to have dealt with, just stick around and we can continue troubleshooting. Okay. See you, everyone. Have a good weekend.